Hey everybody, it's Pat here. Thank you for joining me on this Friday. Just trying to get my sound to go down on my monitor. But wanted to thank you for joining me for what I think is an important concept. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the process of building guidebooks and really 5 items that are going to make this process a lot simpler for you. So I think the actual title I called it, right? Five items to create effective facilitator guides. And the first place I think we really need to look at is what is effective, right? How do we go about determining what's going to be effective? And where I would first start would be, what role does a guidebook play in our training, right? And for those who had who've seen some of my other streams or even the YouTube short I put out yesterday about the role of a facilitator guide, this would be one place to start, right? The role a facilitator guide plays is 3 parts, right? One, it's that in-the-moment reference aid, right? Say this, do this, ask this, show this. But it's also, it's a study guide. How do we ensure consistency across multiple locations, multiple facilitators at different times? Like we taught it this week and now we're going to teach it in 2 months. How do we do consistency, right? So it comes in as that study guide role. And lastly, it's what I call it's a ruling document. I want everything to be in one location where I can find it. I can pull the guidebook off the shelf or out of the digital library, and I have everything I need to be successfully lead a course. So we're going to kind of come at it with this in mind, right? This is how we're going to determine effectiveness, and we're going to look at 5 items today that I think we're going to help us do that. The other thing I think is a good place to start, let's look at Stephen Covey and the 2nd habit of highly effective people, right? Begin with the end in mind. We want to have that kind of mindset. And you're going to see as we kind of talk about these items, how, looking at the big picture or how everything fits together can make it a lot easier for you to create all these items. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'd love to hear from you, where you're at or what you think it should be, what creates an effective guidebook. Put it up in the chat. And again, I still do this, 6 months later, I still point at my screen like you can see where I read comments when I do this. But please, I love it for this to be interactive. So put it in there, and as we have questions, we are going to be able to talk. So let's see, what do we have so far? Liz coming in from Nashville. For those who haven't had a chance to sit on any of Liz Wool's items, you really should. She does some amazing stuff about virtual training. And then who else? Teresa, love the idea of a ruling document, right? It's for me, like, I like to do things in groups of 3, right? So to me, the ruling document, it's really a mindset about how you build. But I think it's important enough to say it's a 3rd role of a facilitator guide. All right. So what we're going to jump in with today, we're going to start off with, what are we trying to accomplish, right? The more we can talk about what's happening or what we're trying to do, keep that all in mind, that's going to be a big driving factor in whether our guidebook's effective or not. Right? So we've already laid out the groundworks, right? We want it to be an in-the-moment reference aid. We want it to be a study guide. And we also want to make sure everything's captured in one location. But what we're trying to accomplish, right? This is why we're doing the training, right? So it's our learning objectives, right? Our performance outcomes. But if we're trying to achieve something, it needs to be in the guidebook, right? The idea, again, with a guidebook is that anybody should be able to take it off the course or take the course off the shelf, check it out digitally and have every single thing they need to do, right? So we could go about teaching customer service, multiple ways, but in this course, these are the objectives that we're trying to achieve. So we've written those down. The other item that needs to be in there is why we're doing this training, and this is another one we've talked about in, these 5 things, they're not all in, this isn't everything, and we're not going to dive deep into all of these. I talked about the why in a previous live stream, which, you can get on the YouTube. But the why, this allows us to speak to the participants, right? And why it's important to them, show them there with them, what's in it for me, right? So we can get the more we can talk to their why, we can get their buy-in. But it's not just the participants, right? There's a why this training is important for the overall organization. And generally those are going to be tied a lot to those learning objectives, but sometimes not. But there's a why for the stakeholder, right? Who needs that training to be developed, right? Is it the sales team? What's their why for it, right? Is it HR? What's their why for it? So the more we can understand what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to do it, we can better set up the guidebooks to get us to where we need to be. So just keep in mind, you need to have a place in the guidebook for what we're trying to accomplish, right? I actually use that why. Both of these. I use these in both the facilitator guide as well as the participant guide, right? So in the participant guide, I may say, here's the objectives or the outcomes that we're looking to achieve out of here. And then I provide the participants a prompt saying, what were you hoping to get out of this course, right? So with the learning objectives, at the end of the course, when we're summarizing, I can circle back to those learning objectives, right? Here's what we're trying to do. And then I can call on and say, hey, Teresa, what did you write down? What were you trying to get out of this course, right? And now we can kind of tie it back in and they can see what they were trying to get and were we able to get there. Same with the why. The why, why are you doing this training? The prompt I give for participants is, what do you hope to get out of this course, right? And so that, for me, is an activity that I use up in the introductions a lot of time, right? I can lay out and say, take a few moments, you see, they can see what the why is, and I generally do this when people are first coming into the course, whether it's virtual or in the classroom. But then I can, we're filling out a prompt. Maybe they're typing in a chat, however you want to do it. But when let's say do the introduction activity and, people are saying what department they're from and their name and all that stuff. Things we can now talk about is have them say, one thing of why they're excited to be here, right? Now, when we get them talking about why it's important to them, we can get better buy-in, and better buy-in includes better engagement. So just capturing this information and having it in one location is going to make your facilitator guide much more effective. All right. So next thing, and you've heard me talk about this all the time, structure and formatting. Picture you're talking to your kids, right? Like the things that you harp on them daily. That's me for structure and formatting. We need to have a defined structure and a defined set of formatting that we use in our guidebooks. So for me, and please steal this structure, I look at this, I write everything, and I say everything, like 90% of the time, this is the structure I use, right? I have my overall course or program is made up of modules. Modules are made up of lessons. Lessons are made up of content blocks. Right? You may use different terminology. Modules may be terminal objectives. Lessons may be enabling objectives or subtopics and topics and subtopics, or content blocks or learning chunks, right? But have a defined structure. And really what we're doing now is we're building modularly. And I don't know if that's, I don't think I pronounced that word right. Modularly, right? We're building in modules or in chunks, right? So now I can actually, at some point, I could build a module and its lessons, and it's a part of an overall course. Or maybe I just want to build a lesson on email etiquette that could later on be brought into an overall course about, how we email customer service. And that email customer service module could later on be brought into my overall new hire training. Or I could I could save out a piece of, phone etiquette that could be then used in another training program. So the more we can build compartmentally or in pieces, think like Lego blocks, we can now start picking and choosing and using those where we need them. So it's a way that we're going to be able to build quickly because we don't have to think about it. 90% of the time, this is what we do. But it also opens up the door for us to start picking and choosing pieces and stitching them together and creating reusable or repurposable learning objects. All right, so after that, wrong button. So there's our structure. Now let's talk about formatting. Formatting is where people spend about 50 to 60% of their time building guidebooks. And this isn't on like, hey, how do we best get people to, get to this objective? How should we lay out this activity so it's most effective? That's not that 50 to 60% of the time is like, where do I put something on the page? What font do I use? What color do I use? Hey, I brought an image, but now it's over on page 3 instead of page 2. 50% of your time. So if you take industry average, so to develop 1 hour of classroom training, it's about 38 hours of development time. So if you can come up with a defined format that you don't have to worry about this, instead of being 38, you're going to be somewhere down in the 17 to 20 hour range just off of that. So for me, formatting, I always build in tables, and you'll see this a little bit. So I use a 2-column or a 3-column table. I always provide visual cues. I use headlines or keywords, and some of these we're going to circle, and you're going to see a lot of these as we go through further on. Clear and concise text, slide images, images, things that I want, anything I need to be shown that the facilitators are doing or the producers are doing, I need it to be in the guidebook. I call that mechanics matter. Like if I want to have it happen, I put it in the guidebook, right? As well as, facilitator and producer notes. So a lot of these are going to be, we're going to dive deeper into these, but this is I'm pointing in the wrong way. This is the formatting that I use daily. And I'm telling you, clients who use our software to do this, you can do this individually or, our software does it. I mean, saving tens of thousands of dollars just off formatting. All right. So after, when we're thinking about, the idea of the defined structure, it's really about just having, standard operating procedures. How do we go about doing this so that we can do it effectively? We can do it consistently, right? If the idea is that we're trying to have consistency in how, I teach it in Boston, Liz teaches it over in Tennessee, how Teresa does it in Ohio. Whatever we do, we want to have it laid out the same way. So the more we can come up with a defined structure and a defined format, so regardless who's building it, facilitators know what to do each and every time it happens. All right, so third one. Let's talk about a module page. So this is, in a facilitator guide, we already talked about the structure, right? The modules, courses are made up of modules. So modules, these are our terminal objectives, which again are tying back up to what are we trying to accomplish, right? So you're going to notice everything kind of starts stitching together. But a module page in a facilitator guide is going to look something along these lines. So again, this is using the structure that I use, but we're capturing specific information, and it really ties into how do we make sure whoever's leading the course has everything they need to successfully do this. Right? So on a module page, we're capturing information like what's the goal of this specific module? So it's your terminal objective, it's your performance outcome, right? It's written down. How long does it take to do this, right? How many lessons does this make up? The module page is a general snapshot of what's going to happen over the next series of 1 to however many lessons that are driving us to our this specific terminal objective that we're trying to achieve with this training program. There's an overview. An overview is a 1 to 2 sentence description of how we're getting the facilitator, or how the participants are getting to that specific goal, right? So if our goal is to define the key characteristics of, amazing customer service, the overview could be something along the lines like through a series of role plays, videos, and, hands-on moments, the participants will be able to see, and you break it down. So 1 to 2 sentences describing briefly how we're getting the participants from where they're at to the goal or the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And then we're going to have, we want to have a short list of materials, right? Everything that you would need to do this one specific piece. And then I like to to capture my resources or references outside of my list of materials, right? So think about, if there's articles, if there's regulations, all of those things. And so it really plays two roles. One, in the actual, in the getting ready to teach or getting ready to lead this training, the facilitator can quickly glance at it, they can see what they need to do, and it's all right there. When we start building more compartmentalized, I can say that one better. When we start doing that and I start maybe pulling pieces and I'm, what was done in one training, we can repurpose to use in another. Obviously, we got to rework the material, rework the voice. But this is now a snapshot of what we were doing for this objective, right? So you may end up having, a similar, some trainings that have similar objectives, but you go about it different ways. So quickly using a module page to get a general idea of what we were trying to achieve, the time frame, the materials, right? We could quickly look and say, hey, you know what? This one would work great in our new virtual training, where this module, it's too much. This one, what we were trying to achieve or how we went about achieving this goal in, in module 2 doesn't really work in the new medium that we're trying to do it. So it's a nice, it's a snapshot to get ready for the training, but it's a nice reminder for when the training's over and we're now trying to repurpose things so we don't have to start from a blank page. So for me, got to have a module page. Figure out how to get this information. It's going to help your facilitators be ready to successfully lead that training. It's going to help you as a developer be able to start reusing and not always starting from that blank page. So I can't stress that one enough. All right. Fourth one that we're looking at, visual cues and headlines. All right, so visual cues and headlines, right? It's part of those formatting that I was talking about. And again, we're tying back to that idea of the roles that the facilitator guide plays, right? So for this one, tying back more to that in-the-moment reference aid, right? The idea is that we want to have facilitator guides that are at-a-glance document. Right? We want our facilitator to be able to glance down, get the information, and be right back up in front of the class, in front of the auditorium, in front of the webcam, whatever it is. So if a facilitator guide it needs to be at a glance. And so visual cues and headlines are going to help that. So, one thing I like to include in my facilitator guide is, I call it a map legend, but it's laying out all the different visual cues, what they are, and what they could look, what they look like and what they mean, so that, let's say that, a new facilitator using your guidebooks understands, when they see an icon, what it represents. The more we build and the more we use these content blocks with visual cues, the more we do it and the more facilitators lead training with it, the more comfortable and they're going to understand what they mean. The idea behind this is you see in it, your brain can process images and words in different parts of their brain at the same time. So if we see as they get used to a specific image, they'll know what to do just off that image. So picture you're driving, right? You're driving down the road and you're in Europe. You're not in the US, or you're in Canada, or you're in Mexico, and you see a red octagonal sign with a white border around it. Regardless of what the words say across the middle of it, you need to stop, right? It's an accepted symbol across the board of what that means. The more we can buy into your team can buy into icons and come up with here's what ones we use and what they mean, the better they're going to be able to quickly glance down, see what they're doing. And I see some comments coming in. So Teresa again, reusable creates efficiency. Absolutely. Mohammed, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining, but you're welcome. And anytime you guys have any questions, please let me know. Let me see what else. Teresa, visual cues. I'm telling you, it is a game changer. And when we tie it to the next part, which we're going to get to in a moment, it's going to just take it, go from here. We're going to go from 10 to 11 on the music dial. All right. So graphics cues, visual cues. So what these could look like, here's an example. Like I just grabbed a snippet out of one of, a sample guidebook, right? It's obviously in Latin, but so we have a visual cue. So if I look at this, we know that this specific icon means say. This is something I need to talk about, right? But now I've tied it with a headline next to it. So I can quickly look at this and I see that the icon for say and a headline that says say something like. And so for me, this headline or keyword, say something like, means I don't have to say this exact. I just have to get the general idea across, but everything's written down that I would need to, right? So I've got everything, but put it into my own words. Where a different headline, same, I'm seeing this, the icon for, all right, I'm going to be saying something, and now I have a headline like say exactly. All right, maybe this is a regulation that needs to be read. Right? Imagine we were doing police training and we're talking about Miranda rights, right? The Miranda rights have to be said exactly, right? So that's something that we're say exactly versus say something like, we can see the difference of those. So the more as a team, as a learning department, training department, you can come up with some, specific icons that are tied to specific training blocks, we call them content blocks. Right? So say, do, ask, show the slide, activity, right? Turn webcam on, like whatever things you can do, key point, all of these are different types of content blocks and will have their own icons. But we get those icons, now tie them to specific headlines, and now we're driving action just in, a quick glance. What it also does is you're going to find, and my guess is you probably have guidebooks that are built out where at some point you've typed in click to go to next slide, or go to next slide, click to go to next slide, click for next slide, whatever that is. We can get rid of that entire line, right? We can drive action off a single image, right? Whatever the icon is that you're using to show a slide, that, as soon as a facilitator sees that, they know they need to click the button with their mouse, and it will transition to the next slide. So visual cues and headlines drive action, and they drive it in a way where you can do it at a glance, which again, we don't want people reading from guidebooks. We want them face first to the camera, face first to the class. All right, last one today, facilitator and producer notes. So for me, I'm going to pop back over, and if I can grab the right one. So on formatting, right? When I was talking about formatting, two or three column table, visual cues, headlines, right? The other one that we have down at the bottom is producer notes. So the idea here, I'm just trying to get back to the right one. The idea is there's information in a facilitator guide that the facilitator needs to get across to the class. Either they need to say it, they're doing some sort of action. There's certain things that say this, we're going to, prompt them to turn to certain pages in their participant books. But then there's times where we need the facilitator or the producer to be there's stuff that they need to do or take action on, but they don't necessarily need to tell the class about it. And so this is where the idea of a facilitator or producer notes come in. And so again, you're seeing different type of content block, right? So we've got a visual cue now. This one, it's guy raising his hand, right? It's question and answer time, right? So got my hand raised on my icon. I see a headline for ask. And then right underneath there, clear and concise text. What are the 3 steps in great service, right? Obviously, I just made up this line. But now, so column 1, visual cue, driving action. Column 2, I've given a headline to support that visual cue. And then here's the information that needs to be delivered. What are the 3 key steps in great service? And then in that third column, I've now provided some prompts for the facilitator, right? Listen for, I'm asking somebody what's the 3 steps are, and now I'm prompting them to listen for these specific responses. In this case, and I always use this one, or a lot of times I use this as an example because I see it so often where someone will say, what are the 12, the 12 ingredients needed for this recipe, or whatever it is. What are the 7 important things people must know, or 5 things you need to successfully do your job? And then nowhere in the guidebook or in the training materials is that information written out. So I'm an underachiever. I probably, out of 5, I may know 3, right? Where, I know Liz and I know Teresa, they're going to know them all, right? And Muhammad, you probably, you're an overachiever, right? You know, out of 5, you know 6 of them, right? So if we want stuff to happen, we need to write it down in guidebooks, or we need to capture it. And again, ruling document, everything's in one location. But now we can prompt facilitators about this information, right? Listen for these things. If they didn't say it, we now can circle back to it. Or maybe this is a producer, right? Where we're prompting them to drop something into the chat, or, turn on everybody's webcam, or mute everybody, or unmute everybody, right? We're driving action that the facilitator doesn't necessarily need to say, but we're capturing it in a certain location. So that's the idea between the facilitator and producer notes, right? Just giving a place where everyone knows what to expect, and it's all in one location, right? So if we were looking at this as a whole, column 1, visual cue, column 2 has got a headline with clear and concise text. So basically, I know as a facilitator, I'm basically, what I need to deliver to the class is in column 2. I'm using column 1 to drive my actions. And then column 3 is stuff I need to pay attention for, right? And if we go back to the idea of, building modularly, compartmentalize. I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna practice all weekend. I'm gonna get that word down. But we're gonna drive. If we're gonna build in pieces, being able to, from one document, pull out pieces that we want to use in another document, right? So, and I guess this is bonus number 6. Bonus tip for here's number 6. The material that we write needs to be written for the final audience, right? So a say block, right? Here's stuff I want the facilitator to talk about, right? I can write that material in the voice of the facilitator, right? Explain, the 7 steps of, highly effective people are blah, 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 right? Where if there's something I want the facilitator to talk about, but I also want to have it in the participant book, I'll use a key point. And now what I write down in the key points block would be specifically written in the voice of that final audience, the participant. So now if I move material from a facilitator guide to a participant guide, right? I bring over my key points, but I don't bring over my say blocks. I can just bring over what's in column 1 and what's in column 2, and whatever's in column 3 falls away. And if let me pop back here. With this concept in mind, when we go, if I'm, let's say this was a key point block, I could then, so column 2 would have been written in the voice of the final audience, the audience, the participants. But if there was additional information I need to get across to the participants that the facilitator needed to be doing or paying attention to while we're talking about this key point, I could put it over column 3. So think about those, and I'm going to pop back over to my visual cues if I can get the right page. These ones. Look, once you kind of figure out those content blocks that you're going to be using, the different block, if you can look, we have activity, audio, breakout, notes capture, case study, chat, right? Handouts, microphone, producer, role plays, right? All these different things, flip chart, whiteboard, whatever those are. Then determine who's the final audience, right? Is this just for the facilitator? Is it just for the participant? Is it just for, is it strictly for the producer? Or is it for, let's say, the facilitator and the participant, right? So if it's for facilitator and participant, I would write that material in column 2 in the voice that works for the participant, supplement the information over in column 3, and now when I go and move material over into my participant book, I don't have to rework that key point because it's already written, and I've now saved myself some steps. I don't have to now say, all right, I have to now go through and look at everything again and change it from a voice that works for the facilitator to a voice that works for the participant. Same thing with the key, those headlines. How do we drive headlines that work for both audiences? So that's step, I guess step 6 or tip 6. Keep in mind who your audience is for the different content blocks that you're going to be using. All right, so I like to keep these to about a half hour. I know I'm kind of right there. If you guys have any questions, please, reach out to me on, connect with me on LinkedIn. You reach out for me there. There's my email. There's my phone number. Feel free to reach out. And my one ask for you guys, if you haven't already, please take a look at my YouTube channel. Look about, if you can, subscribe to it, like or comment. It's one way I can show the bosses that, there is, what these things are effective in what we're doing. I'm having a big push to get to 100 because then I can actually get it over into my name versus a whole series of numbers and letters. But, that would be my ask. Going forward, though, look at these 5 steps. How can we start implementing these into what you're doing in your training? These aren't just the 5 things, as I'm holding up 6 fingers, right? These weren't the 5 plus the bonus, right? There's more to it. If I gave it to you all today, you guys wouldn't watch what next week. But, it gets in depth. So I'm here to help. But with that, I will be a minute over today, and I will give you back to your Friday. All right? Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.